Okay, everyone, welcome to the November 22 Talga Group Quarterly Investor Webinar. Today, we'll hear a presentation from Talga's Managing Director, Mark Thompson, about the group's recent updates. Unfortunately, we don't have Mark on video this morning, but we do have him on audio. And following Mark's presentation, there will be a Q&A session. Thank you to everyone who submitted a question ahead of time. You can also submit a question during the presentation through the Q&A function on Zoom. We have received quite a few questions, so if we don't get to yours, feel free to get in touch with us after the webinar at info@talgagroup.com. I now welcome Mark Thompson, Managing Director of Talga Group. Mark, over to you.
Hello, everyone, wherever you are. I hope you are well. Apologies for not having video of me, although some of you may say that's an improvement. I am conscious that of time, so let us go through things in a timely manner and have plenty of time for questions. For those of you who are new to the company, we are differentiated by being fully integrated from the mine all the way through our processing technology and into the products themselves. This provides a lot of strength and strategic power to the company's developments going forward. And we, of course, do not just produce strictly graphite anodes. We also make silicon and other types of anodes as well. So we truly are a battery materials company that specializes in the most sustainable form. So we're providing an alternate to the existing fairly high polluting anode supply chains, which are heavily focused in Asia and setting up for growth in other parts of the world for the transition to electrification of mobility. Most of our staff are in Europe. Up in northern Sweden near Kiruna is the Vittangi graphite project where the mine is. In Luleå in northern Sweden is where the refinery site is, and our current electric vehicle anode manufacturing site is. Down in Stockholm, we obviously have got some representation there. And outside Sweden, we have our long-term UK R&D lab is in Cambridge in the UK. That's where we develop new products and integrate quite closely with the research community about the latest battery technologies. And then in Rudolstadt in central Germany, as it were, that is where we have had a pilot. That's where we do our pilot plants of our metallurgical processing, and it's where we've been scaling up silicon as well. And of course, we've got some representation in Asia through our employees and also valued contractors. And that's been involved both from technology coming out, plus commercial lines going in. And we're running that from Perth, where the company started. We're listed on the ASX. I know there's some questions about that we'll get to later on. So our overall mission is not just wholly within this company and its shareholders, it's also being a part of a solution to the world's environmental issues. So it's to make innovative graphitic materials via the most sustainable batteries and consumer products. So that includes graphene going into other materials as well. And we say the word enable because that's the way we see it working. Some of our materials are very new and people don't know what they can do for them. Other ones are replacing materials that are already there. I think graphite, of course, we would all recognize if you're an existing shareholder that it's been under the radar for quite a long time, even though it's a large volume part of the battery. In fact, across different lithium-ion chemistries, from NCA to NCM and LFP, which of course is growing rapidly these days as a lower cost sort of form of lithium-ion battery. While you have differing amounts of nickel, cobalt, and other materials in those, or different minerals and different metals, graphite is consistently used across the anode, across all of them. So from a technological threat point of view, if people worry about new technologies replacing it, just bear in mind that the millions upon millions, heading towards trillions of gigawatt hours are all based on graphite anodes. And there'll be the incumbent king, as it were, of the anode technologies for a long time to come. Although, of course, there is room for other ones to come into the market as well. but the overall vast volume is all graphite based. We make a comparison here to the rare earths in that the supply of natural graphite that forms anodes for batteries, for lithium-ion batteries, is actually in a worse shape than rare earths. And rare earths have had a lot of publicity over the years for how they're overly concentrated in the downstream processing in China. Likewise, anodes for batteries are even more concentrated in China. It's nearly 100%. So, this is the original thesis, is somewhere else in the world needs to develop an anode production pathway that is cleaner, that is an alternate to Chinese supply, and is based in somewhere that's as stable and secure and as close to customers as possible, which, when you look at the geopolitics of the world, means trying to definitely be on the same continent as some of your largest customers, and that's a big part of what we do. Recently, Benchmark released this image on graphite anode pricing. It's the first time that we've seen, I guess, some of the more accessible forecasters have published anodes, so it's new. It's a good start to being able to give some pricing indication on anode pricing. They've created a sort of 3 grades of synthetic and 3 grades of natural that make up anodes, and they're currently pulling together some prices there. Something to keep an eye out, of course, is the vast range, which is based around the different qualities. Benchmark choose to use things like purity and energy density, but bear in mind that customer pricing for anode is actually based on testing of the material and it reaching certain benchmarks of performance that they want. It can include things like shelf life, energy density at different charging rates at different temperatures. So there's a lot more to it than what they're representing in their pricing. But I think it's great that the industry is maturing, in that, very much like the early days of lithium. In the early days, all lithium was private contract. Then groups like Benchmark and Fast Markets and others started publishing more information. And so I guess the argument is that you can look forward to seeing more pricing being publicly available, although it won't exactly reflect individual companies' products where they're going exactly. The important thing here too is to see that it's relatively stable. This is only over a short period of time, 1 year. And these are Chinese prices, by the way, they're not European. And these are Chinese prices that are still within China. So it doesn't allow for transport, doesn't allow for CO2 premiums, doesn't allow for performance premiums or anything like that. But again, it's a good rough guide that you'll start to see, I think, other companies come on board as well. It'll be interesting to see how it develops. What I think you're seeing at the moment is raw graphite pricing actually is going up quite a bit, around 30% recently of the raw natural graphite. And what that is happening is getting absorbed by some of the anode makers who are buying that material on the market. They're not integrated like Talga. And then they're not able to pass that on so quickly because they're in contracts with suppliers, with customers. So it'll be interesting. There'll be a time lag between the raw material prices going up, both synthetic inputs and natural inputs. And I think you'll see a lot more diversity of this very shortly. The outlook is all for pretty severe price increases over the next couple of years, is when the fireworks are all projected to start, and that aligns very well with our thinking. And you'll be able to compare this pricing to what we published in our DFS over periods of time, the forecasts that were made then versus how things are tracking now. Our flagship product is Anode C. It's not the only product we have, but just to point out that it isn't an average sort of product. It's a very high performance product. It's got super low resistance to most materials. It's got very, very low swelling compared to normal naturals. So in this way, it does perform more like a synthetic, although it has a natural background. It's got super fast charge rates, works well at low temperatures, which is very much around the storage. There's issues around low temperature that affected the Boeing 787s originally, and we can sort of help add more safety into those areas. It works well by itself, or it can be blended with synthetic. Currently, the battery industry for EVs, which are very, very high quality products, they're not the lower end of that pricing you just saw. That is the high performance materials are, some blend of synthetic and natural, and it really comes down to how well your natural works in with the synthetic as a blend for the bulk of that those customer demands. So they tend to work together, and there's quite a bit of tech around how you can make them work together and add 1 + 1 = 3. And you can get higher benefits from smaller amounts or from different types of natural. So again, just to point out, there's a lot of diversity in reality compared to it being like a raw material, which it is not. It's not a commodity. It's more of an advanced chemical. This particular product obviously has been tested by groups like ACC, who have announced offtakes with, but it's in very advanced qualification, or has finished qualification with some groups under NDA who we're in negotiations with commercially. This is possible because we already produce coated anode ourselves from material we have mined. So this is not contracted out. This is part of our electric vehicle anode plant that we've invested in and built in, finished commissioning in March and April this year, and it's producing materials which are allowing the auto OEMs and the battery makers for them to see what not only our technology works, but see what's involved with the coating of the anode and feel comfortable that they can sign up to this sort of growth, this sort of site expanding in future. So it's a significant asset, and that materials providing materials to groups like ACC, who are a joint venture between Mercedes, Stellantis and Saft. Saft are owned by Total, the giant French energy group, and that non-binding offtake, we are negotiating with them to move towards a binding offtake for substantial volumes. That's about 60% of annual production in the first 5 years. And this follows, obviously, testing of the material. So there's some validation there of our material, particularly for the high performance brands like Mercedes and the high performance brands within Stellantis. Funding of the project, as you know from the DFS, was about $480 million US of capex required. We have got really advanced discussions now, maturing with a whole range of European financial institutions, multilaterals, development banks, export credit agencies, as well as commercial banks. So the basic strategy is around having a majority of the funding to be debt-based, with equity, the balance of the equity, being done within project equity or joint venture partners like Mitsui, who we have a relationship with, amongst others who are also looking at partnering in on the project. We recently hosted a lot of DD visits from groups like the European Investment Bank, Swedish Export Credit Agency of the government there, and commercial groups like the Nordic Investment Bank. So yeah, we're pretty excited about what we're seeing in their efforts and what they are doing. It's the sort of project that fits within a lot of their mandates on a green investments, battery materials in new places in Europe. So I'd say that we've been really pleasantly surprised by how motivated these groups have been, and that's a big part, obviously, of looking at Talga as an investment, is how feeling comfortable that money can be raised to build the project, and that's well underway. On the permitting side, you would have maybe seen this morning on the ASX, we released the exact court date that's been described for the hearing for the environmental permit, which covers Natura 2000 and the Swedish environmental permit. And with a decision on those, that also can trigger Bergsstaten, which is the mining inspectorate of Sweden, to allow the exploitation permit. So unlike other companies in the past in Sweden, we've done all three together, and we applied for those in 2020. And we've had site visits successfully conclude in the last few months, and it's really good to get now confirmed dates when things will be decided, and then shortly afterwards published by the court. Following that, obviously, we will look at other. I'll talk about the project future elsewhere. Here you can see at the top, actually a vision of the mill site is on the right. It's concentrator. It's very small, and you've got some open pits there which are this would be in around year 8 or 10 of the operation, where some of the early pits have already been backfilled and have got trees growing on them again. So it's a mine that's basically rehabilitates as it goes along, and therefore can sort of operate fairly sustainably as a mine can do, with plans to go underground in future if that's all comes about with the Niska expansion. Down the bottom, you've got a new artist rendering based on our actual engineering drawings now. So you've actually got the front-end engineering and design completed on the sites to the point where the mock-up. So I can tell you that in the last few days, we have had groundworks start a bit more in earnest on that site down in Lulio. That's the Anode refinery. So that's the purification plant in the back of it there, and you've got the coating plant in the foreground of that image, and that's just behind the steel mills and the port of Lulio. The trial mine's been a really good success this year. Fantastic to see the material get opened up a bit bigger. We took out the balance of the 25,000 tonnes. So the hole you see here actually produced a quarter of what our annual rate would be. So you can just see with our high grades of ore, how small the volumes can be to provide meaningful amounts of anode. That material's now been crushed, and we're rehabilitating the site. Here at the top left, you can see the ore being crushed. You can see how amazingly consistent it is. It's been fantastic to see, to be honest, for me to see larger amounts of that dug up and processed. Looks great. In the bottom left, you can see we've already backfilled the pit. There's liners and there's other things that have been done that are all teaching us technologies and things that we'll be using in the full-scale development. And in the centre at the bottom, you can see now the topsoil is about to go back on and start regrowing. This area has all been logged in the past. Frankly, that landscape looks very similar to what it does after logging. So we're looking forward to monitoring how the regrowth works in that area and taking those learnings into the full-scale development. On the right, you can see an example of one of our environmental monitoring. So all around this area, we've got dust monitors, noise monitors, all sorts of environmental monitoring going on as part of the permitting of the project and also the ongoing management of the project. This is actually a pretty cool piece of kit. It's a water bore that's connected up to the internet, and it gives us live data on the water conditions that are flowing through the ground down a certain tens of meters in the ground. So we can actually see when it's raining, when the snow's melting. We're measuring turbidity, pH, and other materials through there, and flow rates. So the subsurface has all been mapped hydrogeologically and geomorphically, and yeah, it's quite exciting to bring some new tech to a new mining operation in Sweden. Just a word on Talnode Silicon. Some of you might have noticed I've talked about it a little bit lately. We'll look forward to providing an update, but just to point out that whenever you've heard about something, we may not publish stuff on it for a long time afterwards, but we are usually still working on something in the background. We've been scaling up the silicon production in Rudolstadt. We've been improving the product. We call this Gen 1. We've actually got 2 more generations we want to do using this style of production. And it's designed to have a 30 to 50% silicon content. And then you take that and you blend it into whatever you want. So if you've got a synthetic or a natural, you blend that in and you increase the energy density. And yeah, there's... We'll talk to you soon about some of those details. But yeah, we like where that's going. Where the market is for silicon is, it's not an entire replacement for graphite. It's probably in the region of 5 to 10% is silicon additive, gets you a big bang for the buck and gets your energy density up. And that's really useful if you're making a cheaper, lower energy density cathode like an LFP, and then maybe you can get a boost out of using this anode material. So yeah, there's an interesting conjunction of economics around using lower volumes of material but getting the same performance, or you can have the same volume but get higher performance. We also are continuing to work up our conductive additive product. Pretty exciting because that's an existing market where they currently use carbon black, and it's sold by groups like Imerys. And it's pretty, so I guess pretty reasonable pricing, should we say. So we continue to advance that both technically as a product and looking at the feasibility of it. So always doing studies in the background around the commerciality of these things and where they should be. Reload is also, we're looking more into recycling of material. We continue to look at new ways of making silicon. We've got this fantastic idea that we're patenting and we're developing up on, that could lower the cost of making silicon, even silicon anodes even further, just specifically related to our project. And of course, anything that doesn't turn into a say Talnode C on our project, we take out and make graphene out of it, which goes into Talnode Si. So we are trying to use all of the different particles that we've got access to from our deposit and add value there. And that includes graphene products, which I can talk about in question time a bit more. Recently, we raised $22 million in an institutional placement that was very well supported by existing shareholders and $10 million through, of course, the all shareholders. Proceeds are going into advancing this project in every way, particularly expanding the EVA to get even greater volumes up for the customer demand we're getting in the short term for samples, for qualification samples, and early stage work for some commercial groups, and also crack on with the expansion work streams, crack on with growing the resource and the new anodes as well, which can have potentially parallel separate developments to the main one. So yeah, we've tried to do something relatively modest, relatively quickly during what are very choppy, tough markets, and try and make it, expose it to existing shareholders so that that discount involved is going more to existing shareholders rather than new ones. But certainly we're very excited to welcome a couple of new shareholders onto the register from Europe as part of this. That means that we currently today have got 334 million shares on issue, just under 10 million options, which are all staff, employee type incentive options across the group. We've got about 60 staff now. Collectively, then we've 32 million has come in the last month, on top of the cash balance of just under 5 last quarter. So you can see there, that it would be important to have a stronger balance sheet through a time like this over the next few months. I have been knocked off my perch a little bit there, I see in number 1, but essentially you'll see that other existing shareholders have all participated strongly in the last placement and strengthened or maintained their positions. And at that, I'd also just like to point out that we do have, it's not just all about me, particularly now we have a growing capability across the executive team. I remind you of Melissa Roberts, our very capable and awesome CFO, and also growth in our Swedish arm as well, Per-Erik Lindvall, who was fundamental to getting the rebuilt Northlands Iron project in Sweden off the ground, which has been extremely profitable development now for their company called Countess Iron, which is just down the road from us and is also going through a permitting process of their own. So keep an eye out on that. And with that, I'd better throw to questions. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Mark, for the presentation and for updating everyone on the group's activities. As Mark said, we're now going to move to the Q&A portion of today's session. So thank you to everyone who submitted a question ahead of time or through the Q&A function on Zoom. So the first question we have that's come over email. So due to the increasing demand from customers, does Talga anticipate increasing the tonnage of its existing permit applications, or will that be under a stage 3 type production?
The tonnage allowance within the permit hasn't been finally decided. I guess it could be altered within the permitting process at the moment, but it works by averaging the amount of processing over a period of time. So there is some potential for us to increase the volumes in the early years. I guess we'll have to just say more to that when we've got something where the right forum is to speak to it, I guess. But yes, there is potential to have volumes increase prior to the Niska expansion by optimizing and engaging certain practices that are involved with this current permitting process. Yeah, so we've already looked at maximising things there, and we'll just be able to talk about it when it's confirmed. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks. We had a question come through on the Q&A line from Dan. Could you provide any updates on the timelines for Talnode SI?
There's probably nothing I can say that wouldn't be, sensitive right now. All I would say is that it's, something that I'd say is near term. I don't think it's something that, is many, many years away. I think that, some customers that have been testing the material, you can imagine they've given us feedback that we will be using, heading into decisions around that potential to make larger amounts of Talnode SI and commercialize it by having a separate production or having a production facility to make it. But we'll just have to describe that when we're allowed to, reveal the details of that. But I would say at the moment it's more like a collection of, I've been surprised by strong the demand is, and I've been pleasantly surprised that a lot of customers agree with us with our approach on scalability and expandability and cost potential versus the product pricing. So, yeah, I would just say there seems to be a lot of momentum going that would mean, developments could be accelerated. But the exact details of that we'll have to let you know when we can.
Great, thanks. Next question also came through on the Q&A line. Does the newly elected government in Sweden seem favourable to mining?
The overall composition at a federal level would give one more confidence that that Sweden would sort of improve its valuation of having local production of battery materials and mining. I think you could also see this happening anyway by looking at positive other decisions that have happened, like the exploitation license being permitted for Calac, but more importantly, recent government reports where all of the recommendations are around improving the processes, considering that battery-related minerals should be treated as special cases to be supported. So I think at a federal level, yes. At a local level, it's a bit unclear. I'll actually be catching up with a lot of them pretty soon, and we will see. But in general, I think you'd say you've got reasonably confident that it's shifted in a more supportive direction.
Great. Next question that came in over email. When do you expect major investment banks to have Talga on their radar for research?
Yeah, so I see that as literally two separate parts. One is when are you on the radar of major investment banks? So that's happened now. That's already happened. If you look at some of the partnerships we've already announced over the last few years, but it is increasing. The reason you haven't seen research, I'd probably get in trouble for saying it, but frankly, a lot of groups over the last 5 to 8 years, they actually decreased the amount of analysts in their abilities to deliver research. And it's hard because it's not standard old historical metals. It takes a bit of work to do research on some of the new battery things. So I think it's just been a matter of time. I would say that, look, we're well aware that there's not enough research out, not only on us, but on other graphite and anode related companies. It's something that we are discussing as a priority with numerous groups. So I would hope that you're sort of, again, to paraphrase the beginning of the lithium boom, as it were, that we're at that stage now where they're paying attention to graphite, they want to learn about it, but there is a time lag between when that research gets finished and can be published. But I'd be very hopeful that you'll see some start up on us fairly soon.
Hey, what can you tell us about Talga's commercialization plans for the non-core copper, cobalt, iron ore tablets?
Yeah, every time we go to do something, the market claps itself out and destroys it. Also, frankly, it just takes time. It takes the resources away from developing the graphite business. But yeah, we're pretty excited by a lot of things happening in the copper projects, and we've been having a look at, been revisiting some of them lately, and I would say that the copper and the outlook for copper and cobalt, and also we have some sniffs of lithium on one of the projects as well, is it's something that we are in some new dialogues with various groups. We don't know exactly which way to go yet. It hasn't been decided. It sort of depends on essentially reaching out to interested parties and finding out what the nature of their interest is. But yeah, they're not just being totally abandoned. We've actually been doing a bit of work on them, and we will use that to help promote them. And there will be some opportunities, I think, in future. Some of those metals and things, in particular in Europe, you have to take them very seriously. So it's not quite so flippant as just trying to flip them off. Cobalt and things like lithium and copper as well in Europe is could geopolitically become extremely valuable compared to what they are today. So it'd be nice to keep some exposure to them. So we'll just have to let you know at the time, but there's no specific thing I can add to that.
Thanks. Regarding the hearing in Q1 2023, how confident are you in the permit application that's been submitted?
Well, we're as confident as we can be, and I guess you could say why. What basis would you have for that confidence? Well, I mentioned earlier about I've always talked about how the deposit is very, very low volumes because it's very high grade, the fact that it's vertically integrated, the fact that it's entirely going into battery materials, not industrial products. The fact is that it's not currently mined in Sweden, so it's not something that's already produced there. But more importantly, the comments from the court in June, when the ejection period closed, there were some statements made by the county administration board that found that the project could be approved under certain circumstances, and the circumstances were all things that we're very familiar with. For example, mining half the year round and taking care of the water and doing other things that we were doing anyway. So all I can say is that we're not currently aware of specific things that the court would find objectionable enough to the point where we would feel negative about the outcome. We in fact feel very positive, but we just have to wait for the court decision now. Yeah.
Great. Can you tell us if you are considering listing Talga on a US stock exchange?
We review other listings pretty regularly, actually. It seems like every year we review whether we should do something in Europe or the US. Obviously, when the SPAC frenzy was on it, in the last couple of years, that topic came up quite a lot as well. We currently trade there. We know it's just the pink sheets over the counter and it's low liquidity, but it is access, and we do trade pretty regularly there. It just depends on too many factors right now, but it is something we review. It sort of would make more sense when you've got a sort of giant event that would probably involve America, like if we set up some additional downstream processing capacity over there, for any one of our products, whether there was some sort of corporate activity there, it would probably make more sense because our assets are in Europe, and so you'd probably look at there first. However, of course, in the smaller jurisdictions, the liquidity is not good, etc. So, look, specifically on America, it is something we look at occasionally. It's not something I can allude to that we are, advancing rapidly. Right now, we're much more focused on getting this into production based on, our financiers and our customers and the local Swedish authorities and stakeholders. That's our main focus right now. But certainly it will continue to be looked at. And if it gets compelling enough that, America over Europe or something, then, that may arise.
Thanks. We've actually had a follow-up question regarding the non-core assets through the Q&A function. Would you consider drill testing the lithium pegmatite at ITIC East to understand the scale of that potential deposit?
Great question, at the heart of many things. I personally would, but ultimately it's a board decision. I think it's also a decision based around, where do you put your resources? Where are you spending your money and your time? I love exploring. I love finding and adding value through developing new volumes of minerals, and I think we should take the lithium there very seriously. However, it is occurring at a time when, as I just said, we're extremely flat out and needing to remain laser focused on walking before we run on the graphite project and on the anode project. So yeah, look, it is a consideration, but there's a lot of work to be done outside drilling as well. You could do a geochem, you try and get a ground signature on it. You could do some geophysics. There's a lot of things you could do that would be fairly low impact and give you some greater understanding before getting to that point. It also depends on the nature of your partners. If we can do a deal with a partner that's going to explore it and spend that money and that time on it, and it's still a good deal for us, we'll look at that instead. So yeah, it's at the heart of a lot of clashes between being an explorer versus a developer versus a producer, I guess. So we'll let you know when there's a decision.
Right. A question we had over email. If Sweden delays the approval of the mine, or if there's a delay in the approval of the mine, could Talga produce Talnode C from a third-party ore?
Well, the short answer would be yes, in that you said, could it do it? Yes, it could do it. Would it want to, or would it be commercially or strategically, what do you want to do? Maybe not. We haven't, how will I put it? You haven't concluded that other people's materials that we may test from time to time, whether they produce the same product or it's radically different. So then you've got to think about the qualification period for that new material. So yeah, there is the potential for us to see ourselves more as a anode maker that can buy in different materials, or have put on commission, essentially people providing materials that you then coat for a fee on the way through. But that's not our main business case at the moment. So is it technically possible? Highly likely. Is it something that we gear up for, or allowing for in various plans? Not really, because the trial mine material is quite a considerable head start. So if there's any delays, we have that trial mine material that's available. Plus our ramp up of volumes pretty much matches our customers, and our customers ramp up. So they don't just start on day one wanting this certain volume. It actually usually starts small and grows over time as well. So I would say that we've got quite a good capacity to absorb delays, or to a degree, of course. But it is possible that if you were faced with such a big one, that you could look at bringing other people's materials in and setting up business around that. Yeah, it's possible, but it's just not highly sought after at the moment as a way to go.
Sticking with that theme, can you talk about how many offtake partners Talga will be seeking for Talnode C, and whether we'll hold back supply to take advantage of supply shortages?
Well, some of them might be listening, so it's a bit tricky. I think yes, we're seeking diversity across the off-takers and the customers. So we don't want to be too beholden to one or the other. And yes, we would be aware of not wanting to lock in things for volumes too far out, when the market may have a lot of changes in its pricing. There's no such thing as a spot market for anode at the moment, although people said that about spodumene a few years back as well, and one was created. However, anodes are not raw materials, so they don't tend to be bought or sold on spec. They have to be qualified first physically. However, it's not to say that market might not mature to the point where people will be desperate enough to buy material based on spec. And so, yeah, we are aware of that. No, we cannot give you a final number other than to say the strategic importance of having diversity in your customer base and flexibility in your deliverables to take advantage of price fluctuations in future is very much in our minds.
Right. So another question we had over email regarding Talnode SI is what advantages does Talnode SI have over other graphite silicon competitors, and how big do you see that market getting compared to Talnode C?
The advantages of Talnode SI are not actually all about the ultimate performance levels of the energy density. It's more important that it's really scalable. So if a big customer wants 100,000 tons a year or something, then you could produce it. A lot of silicon technologies probably can't ever reach that sort of volume. Like it's not physically possible. The other aspect is cost. You have to have a cost base of producing that material that's low enough and that can play a role in the commercials of the auto OEMs will be acceptable. And that's so for us, it's a low cost and scalable material. Of course, we can produce it not only in Europe, but outside as well if required. How big can it be? Well, there is no end point to that. But yeah, ultimately, if you want to just pick a number like a 20% of additive into the graphite market, but of course it's going to be more expensive than basic graphite anodes. So you can just sort of try and ratio something down from there. But it certainly can be in the short term, tens of thousands of tons this decade, possibly hundreds of thousands of tons around the end of the decade and going into the next. Yep. Hopefully that's enough. But yeah, it's not about a big headbanging competition around perfection of energy density. It's more around you should really be looking at the cost or the price of the product and the scalability versus the energy density. So in other words, try and create a cost per kilowatt hour that you get from that product, and that'll teach you more about what the market is for things like silicon anodes.
Right. So, and a question regarding on the advanced materials side of things. Will the cathode additives be standalone offtake deals that are announced to the market? Or will they likely be with existing customers, or could they be with entirely separate customers from ones that have been discussed? Would you be able to give investors a sense of the potential value range for this product as well?
Okay, different customers. So no, it's not tied into Talnode C customers specifically at all. It's being tested by different groups at different levels, and when I say different levels, I mean different commercial levels versus technical versus commercial. It's very diverse on the conductive additive. So no, we see it as quite a different marketing because it's a cathode additive predominantly. So to learn about pricing, let me say this. First of all, you should go look at the existing cathode volumes in the world and the outlook for cathode volumes and realize that you've got 1 to 2% of that volume is a conductive additive made usually of carbon. Then you should go and look at companies like Imerys that produce conductive additives for cathodes. And with some of them, you can probably go see pricing. Traditionally in the battery industry, both on the cathode and anode side, a conductive additive that's been very successful is a product called Super P, which belongs to Imerys, and you might be able to sniff around and get some pricing for that, but it would not be in a Talga shareholder's favour for me to tell you that across the airwaves. Plus our material is designed to act differently. So our conductive additive is designed to be more conductive than the existing materials, which means you can use slightly less of it for the same performance. And that means you're actually reducing the amount of other additives and you're increasing the amount of active materials in your cathode so you can have higher energy density that way as well. So there's actually a twofold effect coming from having a more conductive product than someone else. And I would say we'll be in a position soon to say something more on that, give you more of a technical update on where that product's at and commercially as well.
Great. Question regarding pricing for graphite. How has the market price of graphite developed in recent years? To what extent are there price differences in terms of the nature of the graphite, for example, flake size, grade, and so on? In which spectrum does Talga's graphite move?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think people are still sort of getting their heads around the fact that up until recently, the bulk of natural graphite and synthetic graphite were going into industrial products, and the batteries were a very small market within that, very small. And where you're heading towards over the next few years is almost all the graphite is needed for the battery market, and the industrial market will be still trying to buy the same volumes as they are now for their industrial purposes. So you've got this not only a new market, but a market that is massively bigger than the last 400 years of what the industrial market evolved to do. And I think that's just not very well appreciated yet. What it means is that the historic pricing of raw graphite materials like graphite flakes, natural graphite flakes, which was based more on a natural composition, shall we say, where there's small flakes are more common because you accidentally break a big one, you get a small one. So you had more small flakes, so they were cheaper, and you had less big flakes, so they were more expensive. But as we've been pointing out for years, battery materials, battery graphite is very small. It's actually smaller than the smallest traded graphite flake. So what works in battery graphite is small particles, not big ones. And you get paid a premium the smaller they get. So pricing for what were previously seen as low quality graphite flakes, being small flakes, are actually now getting higher price rises than large flakes because the batteries are becoming the dominant market instead of the industrial market. So you're living through this shift in real time right now. And that's why, even though that's why if you search online and read most books and things, because they're all based on old information about the industrial markets and, oh, big flake is the best, etc. Well, that was all true in the past, but it's not necessarily true going forward because the battery requirements are something entirely different. They want micro stuff, they want nano stuff. There's different products and they're all very small and they're all highly refined, high purity, and they are difficult to make. They're like talcum powder sized particles. So you're talking about something that's nearly 10% smaller than what gold particles are smashed up in CIP type mills, for example, like modern gold mill processing, those big ball mills going around, and you produce this fine powder that goes out and gets all the gold extracted. This is 1/10 the size of that. You know, these are the sizes that would make a magnetite iron ore mine uneconomic, right, from an energy point of view. So grinding energy to make things smaller is the equivalent of saying money. Costs more. So the ability to make smaller products and smaller graphite particles is where the market is going and will form the bulk. So you're seeing a massive shift from, and it's still underway. It still hasn't overtaken the industrial market yet, but it's happening. You've gone from 50,000 tonne a year to 10 times that in probably 2 or 3 years, heading for the battery market, and that's going to go up by another 10 times in 2 or 3 years. So it's all about small, not big. Small is beautiful in this case. And that's the big change that's happening in the market. And that's why you'll notice some of the pricing published by forecasters is that the smaller size particles are going up because they're the preferred precursors and they're the ones that are in more demand as a battery precursor, whereas everything else is still going into the industrial market. Don't know if that answered all the question, but maybe gives the right context for it.
No, that's great. Thanks. Regarding the share purchase plan, would you be able to speak just about why the share purchase plan closed early?
Yeah, we stated with the SPP, these things are never perfect. You don't know exactly what's going to happen. You don't know how bad or good the market's going to be, and you're not sure exactly how everyone's going to respond. But let's put it in context. 2 years ago is the last time we raised money. from the market this way. And we planned for a $10 million SPP. We received 50 in applications, of which we cut it back to 30, and now no one's happy. People that missed out or got scaled back weren't happy. People that the people in the placement weren't happy because we'd over then diluted things. And because this went to retail shareholders, there was a lot of churn that went on for a long time afterwards, and the share price wasn't able to recover. So pretty much no one was happy, but got the job done. This time we maybe we overdid it the other way, but which I'm sorry about. But what we did was we said, okay, it's 10, and we said it's first come, first serve. So as soon as you exceeded 10, there was no point going more. So that got exceeded in the first 4 or 5 days. And so that's why it was shut early, was there was no potential there was no point in taking, some bigger number like 30 or 40 or $50 million and then having to refund all of that when it's only the first 10 that could be taken. We decided to stick to that because we'd told the placement investors that's what we were going to do. And we told the SPP, we told all of you that's what we're going to do. So we thought this time, instead of moving that goalpost, we would just stick to it. So, yeah.
Okay.
So that's why it closed early. The first 10 million came in, and there was no capacity to take more than that based on what we told the market and the fact we were not going to do oversubscriptions.
All right, thanks. Can you describe with what type of partners we're currently working on graphene programs with?
Well, some of them are in our presentations often as logos. We're still working with some big names. Not really. All I can probably tell you is that, we say this all the time about advancing and hoping to have things out. We are in negotiations on price and volumes with various materials, with various customers, and we just can never say anything until they're concluded. Why do they take so long to conclude? Often the customer, quite deep in the process, when it goes from the sort of technology team and procurement team, goes up to the commercial team, and they realize that by adding graphene, they made the material stronger, and therefore they need less material. So they're going to sell less stuff. So while the graphene is good for the world, they've realized that it's not necessarily good for how much they sell, because they're going to sell less volume and they can't recover the costs any other way. So I think that a lot of graphene commercialization has paused a bit at that point, where the customer's trying to work out how they can introduce it while still making as much money as they were before. But yeah, some customers are getting pretty keen. We've had some materials on shop floors. It's being sold in products, at certain scales, but we just, not allowed to talk about it under the NDA, or, the sort of contract we've done with them is, very exploratory to make sure, particularly with consumer products, they take a long time. Battery materials take a long time to qualify. Some consumer products, they can work on these things for 8 years before deciding to introduce them. So look, I can't say anything specifically other than to say, look, it's not obviously a big focus is on our battery materials that we can deliver and do financing of projects on. The problem with the graphene is if you try and take out, a loan to build some graphene capacity with a partner, the banks just do not know how to value it all properly, and they just don't know how to hedge themselves, and there's no public pricing on it. There's issues. So I think it's coming along, but and some of the products will come into a building near you pretty soon. But as usual, it's a wait and see about when the companies will allow us to talk more about it.
Thanks. All right, so we're coming to the end of our session, so we only have time for one more question. Could you describe your vision of Talga in 2030?
The vision is to have Futangi up and running at the NISCA scale of rates or greater that we've published. My vision would be that it's at a greater rate. subject to all of the local conditions being met and all stakeholders approving, and that material would be making the amounts of anode that we have published under the scoping study for NISCA, which is collectively with Vittangi at least 100,000 tonnes of anode. It'll actually be over that. My personal vision would be that we would, in the meantime, look at increasing that if possible, where allowed. From that material, we would also be in commercial production of Talnode SI at a considerable scale to be determined, that the conductive additives are being sold at considerable scale to be determined, and that as spin-offs from those, we will have other products going out into graphene and graphite world from that material as well. I would like to have some of those operations potentially in different locations that fit the customer's needs, and that we would still be having a good hard look at expansion possibilities, and that the company has revenues well in excess of what we have shown in the scoping study and the DFS to date.
Great. Okay, that's all we have time for today. So thank you, Mark, for your presentation and time answering questions, and thank you everyone for attending. Just a quick reminder that there are 3 ways to vote at the upcoming AGM on Thursday, the 24th of November. If you are personally registered as the shareholder, you can vote in person. If your shareholding is held through a corporate entity, you must provide a duly executed corporate representative form. You may also vote by power of attorney, provided that the power of attorney is provided in advance to the share registry. Or if you are not attending the meeting in person, you can appoint the chairman or another person as your proxy. Your correctly completed proxy form must be received by the share registry no later than 48 hours before the commencement of the AGM. Please note you may be required to provide photographic identification, and the share registry will verify the relevant holding or other proof that your corporate authorization form has been duly executed. For more information and details, please refer to the notice of AGM and the proxy form, which can be found at talgagroup.com/investors. Lastly, keep an eye out for our next quarterly investor webinar, which will take place in Q1 2023, following the release of the next quarterly update. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.